As we look at the second part of Kant's What is Enlightenment, things get quite interesting. Um, you know, there's. Let me just tell you that there's one distinction here that is notoriously difficult to sort out. But once you've sorted it out, I think that it becomes clear, and that is this distinction that he makes between the public use of reason and the private use of reason. Um, think about that. Um, you know, well, first of all, think about the what he says right at the beginning, right? He leaves off the first part of the reading by saying that it's easier for a community, for like a whole group, like a nation, to become enlightened rather than an individual, and that's interesting. Why has he said that? I think that becomes clear when he says that what's required for enlightenment is freedom, and as he says, what sort of freedom am I talking about? He says that the freedom is in question is the least harmful of all, namely the freedom to use reason publicly in all matters. And that's what's just really interesting to think about in terms of this essay. The freedom to use reason publicly in all matters. What he goes on to say is that the public use of reason should never be restricted, but the private use of reason can be restricted. And examples of the private use of reason, he says, for instance, a pastor. Like, imagine that you're a clergy person, that you're the head of a church or a synagogue, or that you're an imam or something, something to do with religion, and that you're speaking to your congregation. What you can say is limited, right? But as an expression of your individual opinion, as you are the representative of some kind of religious group, you kind of have to stick to the orthodoxy of that institution. So what he's saying is that in some cases, reason can be limited, but that the public use of reason can't. And what does he mean by the public use of reason? Well, it says it here, but as a scholar, he has complete freedom. Indeed, even the calling to impart to the public all of his carefully considered and well-intentioned thoughts. Now that's interesting, right? So the public, as it turns out, the public use of reason is when you address your speech to the public. That's why I think he says as a scholar, because he's thinking of people who write, but it would be anybody addressing the world at large. Like if I address a specific group, like you, right, a school group or a religious group, or that I may feel, or I may have to recognize that there are certain constraints on what I can say. But when I'm addressing the world, the public, let's say as a writer or a public speaker, so you write a letter to the editor of the newspaper, or you publish an essay, or you make a public speech, that's to the general public. That use of reason, that speech, that reasonable speech, has to remain free. That is, if and what he goes on to say is that the government should never limit what people can say in that context, right? And why not? Well, I mean, that you need to read through it. I mean, why does he think? Why does Kant think that if somehow or another we restricted the use of reason, if we restricted the kind of free exchange of ideas and hypotheses and opinions, that we feel if we would basically be consigning ourselves to ignorance and stagnation, right? That's what I find so interesting about this essay. Is he basically saying that that we can restrict speech, right? He believes but we can't do away with some part, some arena, some forum in society for a an exchange of ideas that is absolutely unconstrained, absolutely free, that that's what it means to live in an enlightened society. There's this great, on this page here, page 3, there's a great distinction he makes where he says, if it is now asked, do we presently live in an enlightened age? The answer is no. But we do live in an age of enlightenment. That is, we don't live in an enlightened age. He didn't, and neither do we, right? But the question we're asking is whether we're living in an age of enlightenment. Enlightenment would be a process, right? Would be a process rather than an achieved state. Like an enlightened age would be, oh, we've arrived. We've arrived at a society which is rational and just. I don't think any of us believe that we have arrived. The question is, are we heading there? Are we making progress to it? And that, he says, he can say about his own age, because he can express himself freely. That's what it means to live in an age of enlightenment, to be part of a process heading towards a rational and just society.